Welcome to Wide Real News. And get ready, folks, because today we're diving deep.
Yep.
Into a story that's got everyone talking.
Yeah.
Equatorial Guinea.
Equatorial Guinea.
This scandal's got it all.
It does.
Leaked videos. A high-ranking official suddenly out of a job.
One.
We're talking about Baltasar Ebang Engonga, the now former Minister of Forestry and Environment.
Welcome to our deep dive into the Equatorial Guinea situation. It's a real political firestorm engulfing the country. Leaked videos, embezzlement, a lot of uncertainty. You've sent over tons of articles and social media posts. Clearly this has really captured your attention, so let's just get right into it.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack here.
This whole thing really revolves around Baltasar Ebang Engonga. Until very recently, he was like a major power player in President Obiang's inner circle. We're talking Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Presidential Affairs, someone who definitely knew where all the bodies were buried, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really, I think, what makes his fall from grace so fascinating to observe. This isn't simply about like one man's alleged wrongdoing. This is about a potential, like a crack in the foundation of a regime that's been in power for decades.
Right. It makes you wonder if this whole structure is about to come tumbling down. So how did we even get here? What brought this all about? It all started with these leaked videos, and let me tell you, they're exclusive. I mean, we see Baltasar seemingly bragging about diverting millions of dollars, funds that were meant for healthcare, education infrastructure, all going straight into his own pockets. I mean, the audacity is just...
It's really quite breathtaking. What I find particularly revealing is sort of the casual nature of these conversations. It really speaks to a culture of impunity. It's as if they believe that these actions are not only acceptable, but almost expected at the highest levels of power. It begs the question, how deep does this actually go? Is Baltasar just the tip of the iceberg, or is he the whole iceberg?
And it gets even more complicated, because the videos also seem to show Baltasar negotiating kickbacks with foreign companies, promising them lucrative contracts in exchange for, well, a little grease for the wheels.
Right.
And a lot of these deals, they seem to have come at the expense of Equatorial Guinea's own development. You know, we've seen these reports, hospitals struggling to get even the most basic supplies, schools lacking crucial resources, but then you see Baltasar in these videos, and he's living the high-life luxury cars, lavish parties.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast, and this is where I think the scandal moves beyond just a domestic issue. It has international ramifications as well. Yeah, if these allegations are proven true, it could really damage Equatorial Guinea's reputation. On the world stage, you have to remember, this is a country with a significant position in the global energy market, particularly when it comes to liquefied natural gas. They supply a good portion of Europe's LNG. So if foreign investors get spooked by this, if sanctions are imposed as a result of this, the economic fallout could be really substantial.
Yeah, and of course, the public is not staying quiet. So social media has just been on fire with these hashtags like Baltasar Scandal and Corruption in Guinea. There have even been protests in the streets, people demanding answers and calling for Baltasar to be held accountable. Even President Obiang, who's really known for his iron grip on power, he's had to do some damage control. He swiftly dismissed Baltasar, hoping to distance himself from this whole mess. But is that going to be enough to calm the storm, I guess is the question.
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
You know, to really understand the potential impact of Obiang's actions, I think we need to look at the broader context of Equatorial Guinea's political landscape. You know, we've been looking at some analyses from experts, like Dr. Martina Ayala, and she argues that this scandal is really just a symptom of a much deeper problem, a systemic lack of transparency and accountability within the government itself. So you know, while firing Baltasar might be a necessary step, it's unlikely to actually address those root causes that allowed the situation to develop in the first place.
And that's something we're hearing directly from citizens of Equatorial Guinea. They feel betrayed, like they've been robbed by the very people that were supposed to be leading them. These leaked videos, for a lot of people, they weren't just about Baltasar. They were a confirmation of what they suspected all along. That while they're struggling to make ends meet, a select few at the top are enriching themselves at the country's expense.
Yeah, absolutely. This anger is not just confined to Equatorial Guinea either. You know, international human rights organizations are calling for a full independent investigation. And there's even some Western governments, particularly those that rely on Equatorial Guinea's energy resources. They're facing growing pressure to take a stance. They're considering sanctions, which could have a ripple effect not only on Equatorial Guinea's economy, but on the global energy market as a whole.
So with all of this going on, What happens to Baltasar now? Officially, he's under investigation, but will he actually face any real consequences?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Equatorial Guinea's judicial system, let's just say it's not exactly known for its independence. There's this widespread perception that true justice is hard to come by, especially when it comes to powerful figures like Baltasar.
Right, and let's not forget, someone in Baltasar's position probably has a lot of information, potentially compromising secrets about others in the government. So if he starts to feel cornered, do you think he might start talking? Could this actually turn into an even bigger crisis, with more dominoes starting to fall?
It's definitely a possibility. And it brings us to another fascinating aspect of this whole story. And that's the role of technology in all of this. The way technology has really brought this whole scandal to light. I mean, these leaked videos spreading across social media, it's really been a catalyst for change. It makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden out there just waiting for the right digital spark.
Yeah, it's true. It's like in the past, a scandal like this might have just been swept under the rug. But now, in this age of smartphones and social media, the truth always seems to find a way to get out. And it's not just about exposure either. Social media has become such a powerful tool for mobilizing people, giving a voice to the voiceless. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. From the Arab Spring to the Me Too movement, of course it's a double-edged sword, right? There's always the potential for misinformation, for echo chambers to form. But there's no denying that it's fundamentally changed, the way we hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. It really underscores the need for digital literacy, critical thinking skills, so we can sort of separate fact from fiction in this ever-expanding sea of information. But going back to Equatorial Guinea, you know the scandal's unfolding against a backdrop of existing challenges. I mean, this is a country with vast oil wealth, yet a huge portion of the population lives in poverty. And these leaked videos with these glimpses of Baltasar's extravagant lifestyle, I think it's just exacerbated this sense of inequality and injustice.
It's like those videos just ripped a bandage off, a festering wound. You know people are seeing such a stark contrast between the lavish lives of the elite and their own daily struggles. And they're starting to ask questions like, why are our schools underfunded? Why do our hospitals lack basic supplies, while those in power are living in a world of champagne and caviar?
Yeah, it's a very valid question, and I think it gets at this larger issue of resource allocation. Yeah. How transparent is the government being about how the country's wealth is managed? If President Obiang really wants to move past this scandal, he needs to address these underlying systemic problems. Firing Baltasar is a start, bud. It's just one step on a much longer road towards reform.
So what about the international community? What role do they play in all of this? I mean, we've talked about calls for investigations and the possibility of sanctions, but is that enough? Can external pressure really lead to any kind of meaningful change in a country like Equatorial Guinea?
It's a very tricky question. I mean, the international community definitely has a responsibility to speak out against corruption and human rights abuses. Sanctions can be a powerful tool, but they also carry the risk of unintended consequences. They could end up harming the very people they're trying to help by weakening the economy or destabilizing the region. So it's really about finding that balance between applying pressure and supporting those efforts to promote good governance from within the country.
So it sounds like there's no easy answer here, no quick fix to these deep-seated issues.
Exactly. It's about building institutions that are transparent and accountable, promoting civic engagement, empowering citizens to actually hold their leaders responsible. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It does feel like this whole situation is a pivotal moment for Equatorial Guinea. Do you think this scandal could actually be a catalyst for positive change? Or is it more likely that things will eventually just go back to business as usual?
It's tough to say for sure. History is full of examples of scandals that led to real reforms, and others that just faded from memory. I think the outcome in Equatorial Guinea is going to depend on a lot of different factors. The strength of civil society, whether the government is willing to embrace reforms, continued pressure from the international community.
So we'll have to wait and see. But it's clear that this scandal has really started a conversation about governance, transparency, and accountability in Equatorial Guinea. And it's a conversation with implications far beyond its borders.
Absolutely. I think what this scandal really highlights is that this is a global phenomenon. Corruption, abuse of power, lack of accountability. These are issues that plague societies around the world, no matter their level of development.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the state of global governance in the 21st century. Are we facing this kind of crisis of trust in our institutions? I mean, with the rise of social media, we're more aware than ever of the shortcomings of those in power. But does that awareness actually translate into meaningful action.
That's the challenge, isn't it? We need to move beyond just outrage and engage in a more constructive dialogue. Demand concrete actions from our leaders. Hold them accountable for their decisions.
And maybe that's one of the key takeaways from this whole deep dive. The Baltasar Engonga scandal isn't just a story about one man's alleged misdeeds. It's really a story about this struggle for a more just and equitable world, a world where power is used responsibly, and where those in authority are held accountable to the people they serve.
And that's a story that's still being written. It feels like we've barely scratched the surface here. There's just so much more to unpack, so many different threads to this whole Baltasar Engonga affair.
I know, it's really fascinating. What I think is so interesting about this whole thing is how this scandal has really shown us the power of technology, especially social media, in terms of shaping the narrative and actually driving real change.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, those leaked videos, they were shared countless times, and they really became like this digital rallying cry that just ignited this public outrage and forced the government to respond. I mean, it's hard to imagine the scandal having the same impact even like 10 years ago, before social media was so prevalent.
Right, it's true. It really shows you the democratizing power of information.
Right.
I mean, in the past, a scandal like this might have been contained, suppressed by those in power. But now citizens have a tool to kind of bypass those traditional gatekeepers and really hold their leaders accountable in a very public way.
Yeah, it's almost like this virtual town square where people can come together and share their perspectives and demand action. And it's not just about, exposing wrongdoing either. Social media can also really amplify the voices.
Yeah.
Marginalized communities, people who might otherwise be silenced.
Absolutely. It's a powerful tool for social justice, for holding those in power accountable, and for driving meaningful change. It's not a perfect solution, of course. As we talked about, there are definitely downsides. Misinformation, echo chambers, the potential for manipulation. But there's no denying that social media has really fundamentally changed things.
For sure. So as this whole scandal continues to play out, in Equatorial Guinea, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they be looking for as the story develops?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that this is not an isolated incident. The issues we're talking about here, corruption, lack of transparency, abuse of power, these are challenges that we see all over the world. They're not unique to Equatorial Guinea. They're part of this global struggle for good governance, for a more just and equitable world.
And it really highlights the importance of staying informed, engaging in critical thinking, holding our leaders accountable, no matter where we live.
Absolutely. This is a story about power, about who benefits from the way things are, and who pays the price. And it's a story that's still being written. The outcome in Equatorial Guinea is still uncertain. But one thing's for sure, the world is watching.
So that wraps up our deep dive into the Baltasar Engonga scandal. We hope you found this information helpful. And as always, thanks for listening. And stay curious.
This Equatorial Guinea scandal is definitely one to watch.
Absolutely.
Thanks for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure.
And for our listeners, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on stories just like this one.
Stay informed, folks.
We'll see you next time on Wide Real News.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.